The room was not meant for music. It was a modest community hall, usually used for meetings, small celebrations, and quiet gatherings. The walls were plain, the chairs were old, and the lighting was soft but dull. In one corner stood a piano that had seen better days. Some keys were slightly worn, and the surface had small scratches from years of use. Most people passed by it without a second glance. The girl stood near the piano, her hands folded in front of her. She was not the type who liked attention. She listened more than she spoke and often stayed in the background. Music was her comfort, not something she used to show off. She had practiced for years in silence, mostly at home, sometimes late at night when the world felt calm and safe. People around her were chatting, laughing, and moving chairs. The mood was casual. No one expected anything special that evening. The piano was only there because it had always been there. Someone noticed her standing close to the piano and smiled. It was a friendly but careless smile, the kind people give when they are just passing time. "Why don't you play something simple?" the person said. "Just a small tune. Nothing serious." The words were not meant to hurt, but they carried an assumption. A simple tune. As if that was all she could handle. A few others nearby nodded, not really thinking about it. They did not expect much. To them, this was just background sound while they waited for the main event to begin. The girl hesitated. She looked down at the keys. She had played many pieces before, some complex, some soft and slow. But being asked to play in front of people always made her nervous. Still, she nodded quietly. She sat down on the bench and placed her fingers gently on the piano. In the back of the room sat her grandfather. He did not blend in with the rest of the crowd. He wore a worn leather jacket with faded patches stitched onto it. His boots were heavy, and his hands were rough, marked by years of hard living. His hair was gray and pulled back, and his face carried lines that told stories no one had ever asked him about. Most people knew him only by his appearance. Around town, he was known as a biker. Loud engines, long rides, and a life on the road were what people assumed defined him. Some found him intimidating. Others avoided him altogether. Very few ever spoke to him for long. He sat quietly, his arms crossed, watching his granddaughter with a calm but focused expression. He did not smile. He did not speak. But his eyes never left her. The girl pressed the first key. The tune she played was simple, just as requested. It was slow and gentle, easy to recognize. Nothing flashy. No fast movements. But there was something different in the way she played it. Each note was careful, full of feeling, as if the music carried a memory. At first, the room stayed noisy. Conversations continued. Chairs scraped the floor. But slowly, one by one, people began to notice the sound. The piano was not loud, yet it cut through the noise in a quiet, respectful way. A few people turned their heads. Someone stopped talking mid-sentence. The air in the room began to change. The girl's shoulders relaxed as she played. Her fingers moved smoothly, not rushed, not stiff. She was not performing for applause. She was simply playing the way she always did, letting the music speak where words could not. Her grandfather leaned forward slightly in his chair. The tune reached him in a way he did not expect. It was familiar, too familiar. His jaw tightened, and his eyes softened at the same time. He had not heard that melody in years. Not since a different life. A life he never talked about. As the music continued, the room grew quieter. Even those who had no interest in piano found themselves listening. There was a calm sadness in the notes, mixed with hope. It was the kind of music that made people think without knowing why. The girl had been told to play something simple, but simplicity did not mean emptiness. The tune carried depth, shaped by long hours of practice and quiet dedication. It reflected who she was, steady, patient, and sincere. She did not look up at the audience. Her eyes stayed on the keys. She played as if the room was empty, as if it was just her and the piano. Her grandfather's hands slowly unclenched. Memories surfaced without warning. He remembered a younger version of himself, sitting in a place far from this hall. A time before engines and leather jackets. a time when his life had been guided by sound instead of speed. No one in the room knew what the tune meant. To them, it was just a pleasant melody. But to him, it was a door opening to a past he had locked away. The girl reached the final notes and let them fade naturally. She did not rush the ending. When her hands lifted from the keys, the room stayed silent for a brief moment. Then came polite applause. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was genuine. Some people smiled in surprise. Others exchanged glances, as if to say they had not expected that. The girl stood up quietly and stepped away from the piano, her heart still beating fast. She did not notice her grandfather yet. She only felt a strange sense of relief, mixed with uncertainty. She had done what was asked. Nothing more. But in the back of the room, the biker grandpa slowly rose from his chair. The movement caught a few people's attention. Someone whispered. Another person turned fully around to look. The air shifted again, this time with curiosity and tension. He took a step forward, then another. His boots echoed softly on the floor. His expression was serious, almost troubled. The girl finally looked up. Their eyes met. She had seen that look before, though not often. It was the look he had when he thought no one was watching. A look filled with emotion he never spoke about. The room grew quiet once more. People sensed that something unexpected was about to happen. What had started as a simple request for a piano tune was no longer simple at all. And no one yet knew that the music had just awakened a secret that would change how they saw both the girl and the biker grandpa forever. The room was still quiet when the grandfather took another step forward. People made space without thinking about it. Something in his presence asked for it. He was not angry, and he was not trying to scare anyone. But there was weight in the way he moved, as if years sat on his shoulders. The girl watched him closely. She knew the side of him even if others did not. At home, he was gentle. He reminded her to eat, asked about her practice, and sat quietly when she played. But in public, he rarely showed emotion. He stayed in the background, letting people believe whatever they wanted. A few whispers moved through the crowd. That's her grandfather. He rides with those biker groups. I didn't know he even liked music. The comments were low, but they carried judgment. People saw the leather jacket, the heavy boots, the rough hands. They filled in the rest of the story themselves. The grandfather stopped a few steps away from the piano. He did not touch it yet. He looked at the girl again, then at the instrument, as if deciding whether to cross an invisible line. His mind drifted backward. Long before the jacket, long before the road, his life had been different. He had not always been known for loud engines and long rides. There was a time when silence mattered more to him, when his hands were softer, when his days were shaped by practice and patience. Music had once been his whole world. He grew up in a small place where options were limited. Money was tight, and expectations were simple. You worked, you survived, and you did not dream too loudly. But he did dream. Every time he heard a melody, something inside him woke up. He found an old piano when he was young, much like the one in this room. The keys were chipped, and some notes were slightly off, but it didn't matter. To him, it sounded perfect. He taught himself slowly, practicing whenever he could. Music gave him a sense of control in a life that often felt uncertain. But life has a way of pulling people away from who they are. As he grew older, responsibilities piled up. Family needs, hard choices, and one painful event after another pushed music further into the background. Then came the road, the bike, the speed, the feeling of escape. The jacket became his armor. People stopped seeing the young man who once loved quiet melodies. They saw only the biker, and over time, he allowed that image to become the truth everyone believed. He rarely corrected anyone. When his granddaughter was born, something changed. Holding her for the first time stirred emotions he thought he had buried. He promised himself he would protect her from the disappointments he had known. He also noticed something else early on. She responded to sound. Even as a child, she calmed when music played. She listened deeply, tilting her head, as if trying to understand more than just noise. When her fingers first touched piano keys, the connection was instant. He encouraged her quietly. He never told her about his own past with music. He never explained why he insisted she learn certain tunes or why he sat so close whenever she practiced. He did not want his story to shape hers. He wanted her path to be free. Still, some melodies stayed with him. The tune she played tonight was one of them. Back in the hall, he placed a hand gently on the piano's edge. The wood felt cool under his fingers. The room watched in silence, unsure what he would do next. The girl's heart raced. She trusted him, but she also felt exposed. Everyone was looking now, not at her music, but at her family. At the biker grandfather, people thought they understood. He finally spoke. His voice was calm but rough, shaped by years of little conversation and much observation. He did not raise it. He did not need to. That song, he said slowly, is not just a simple tune. The words landed softly, but they carried weight. People leaned in without realizing it. He did not explain further yet. Instead, he looked at the girl and gave a small nod. It was the same nod he gave her at home when she doubted herself. A quiet sign of pride. The girl felt her shoulders ease. Whatever was happening, she knew he was not angry. He was not disappointed. Something else was unfolding. The grandfather took a breath. For a moment it seemed like he might stop there. Old habits are hard to break. Silence had been his shield for decades. But the music had already opened a door. He knew that once certain memories were stirred, they did not return to sleep easily. The tune had carried him back to who he was before the world reshaped him. Around the room people waited. Some felt curiosity. Others felt discomfort. A few felt guilt for the assumptions they had made. No one yet understood that this was not about proving anything. It was about truth finally rising to the surface. The grandfather's hand trembled slightly as it rested on the piano. He steadied it. He had faced worse than this. The road had taught him how to stand firm. He glanced around the hall one last time. Faces stared back at him, open and uncertain. Then he looked down at the keys. The same keys his granddaughter had just touched. The same tune that had changed the mood of the entire room. The room held its breath. What started as a simple piano request was turning into something no one had expected. And the secret the biker grandfather had carried for so long was now dangerously close to being revealed. The grandfather did not sit down right away. He stood there, looking at the keys as if they were speaking to him. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like everyone had stepped into the same quiet space. Even the sounds outside seemed to fade. He slowly pulled the bench back and sat. The movement surprised a few people. Some straightened in their seats. Others leaned forward. No one spoke. The girl felt a mix of pride and fear. She had never seen him sit at a piano in public. At home, he only listened. He corrected posture once or twice, hummed along on rare days, but he never played. Not once. His hands hovered above the keys. They were rough hands, marked by scars and small cuts that never fully healed. Hands people did not expect to belong near something delicate. For a moment they shook slightly. He took a slow breath and placed his fingers down. The first note sounded. It was soft, almost unsure. A few people exchanged glances. The sound was not loud or showy. It was careful, like someone stepping into a memory. Then came the next note. And the next. The tune was the same one the girl had just played. Simple, familiar. But when it came from him, it felt older, heavier. As if the song carried years instead of minutes. The girl watched his shoulders relax as he played. His face changed. The hard lines softened. His eyes lowered, focused not just on the keys, but on something far away. The room was silent. No one dared to interrupt. Even those who knew nothing about music could feel that this moment mattered. His fingers moved slowly but with purpose. There was no doubt in his touch now. The melody flowed naturally, like it had been waiting for him to return. People began to see him differently. The biker image faded just enough to reveal something else underneath. Someone thoughtful. Someone careful. Someone who once loved this deeply. When he reached the end of the tune, he did not lift his hands right away. He let the final note settle. The silence afterward was heavy but peaceful. He finally looked up. The girl's eyes were filled with questions. She wanted to speak but did not know how. She had practiced that tune for years without knowing why it mattered so much to him. He gave her a small, sad smile. "That song," he said quietly, "was the first thing I ever learned to play." A soft reaction moved through the room. It was not loud, but it was real. He continued, his voice steady but slow, as if choosing each word carefully. "I learned it when I was young, back when I thought music would be my life." He paused. The past pressed close. "I practiced every day," he said. "I wasn't great at first, but I kept going. I believed if I worked hard enough, something good would come of it." The girl listened closely. She had never heard him speak this way, never heard him talk about dreams. "Life didn't turn out the way I planned," he went on. "Things happened. Responsibilities came. Mistakes too. I walked away from music before I knew what I was losing." He looked down at his hands again. "The road gave me a different kind of freedom," he said. "But it also gave me noise. So much noise that I forgot how quiet can feel." No one interrupted. Some people nodded without realizing it. Others felt a tightness in their chest. He turned to the girl. "I asked you to learn that tune because I wanted it to live on," he said. "Even if I couldn't carry it anymore." The girl felt tears burn behind her eyes. She finally understood. The hours he spent listening. The way he always asked her to play that one song. The silence he kept around his own past. She had not been playing just for herself. The grandfather stood up slowly. He stepped away from the piano and faced the room. "I'm not sharing this to impress anyone," he said. "I'm sharing it because people think they know who others are just by looking." The words settled deeply. "I let people believe what they wanted," he added. That was easier than explaining. The room felt different now. Warmer. More honest. Someone in the back quietly wiped their eyes. Another person lowered their head, thinking of their own assumptions. The girl stood beside her grandfather. For the first time she felt truly seen. Not as someone playing a simple tune, but as someone carrying a story forward. The grandfather placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "She played that song beautifully," he said. "Better than I ever did." The room finally broke into applause. Not the polite kind. The kind that comes from understanding. The girl smiled through her tears. She had been told to play something simple. But the music had done something complex. It had revealed a truth that could no longer be hidden. And everyone in the room knew that this was only the beginning of a story far deeper than they had imagined. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling it left behind stayed in the air. People did not rush to speak. No one checked their phones or whispered. It was as if everyone was afraid that one careless sound might break something fragile. The grandfather stepped back from the piano. He looked lighter, almost relieved, but also exposed. Sharing a piece of himself had taken effort. He was not used to standing in front of people without his usual shield. The girl stayed close to him. She sensed his mix of emotions. Pride, regret, and something else she could not yet name. She wanted to say something, but words felt too small. A person from the front row finally stood up. The movement was slow and respectful. "I didn't know," the person said quietly, "about any of that." The grandfather nodded once. He did not expect understanding, but he welcomed it. Another voice followed. "I judged you," someone admitted. "I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they carried honesty. The grandfather did not respond right away. He looked around the room, meeting eyes instead of avoiding them. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel the need to look tough. "We all do it," he said. "We see the surface and stop there." The girl felt something shift inside her. She realized that music had not only opened a memory, it had opened people. The room slowly returned to quiet conversation, but the tone was different now. Softer. More thoughtful. People spoke with care, as if they were walking through someone else's story. The grandfather moved to the side and sat down again. The leather jacket creaked as he settled into the chair. He rested his hands on his knees and let out a slow breath. The girl sat beside him. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked gently. He smiled faintly. "Some stories are heavy," he said. "I didn't want to place that weight on you." She nodded, understanding more than she expected to. "I just wanted you to love music for yourself," he continued. "Not because of me." She thought of the many nights she practiced alone, believing she was doing it only for her own peace. Now she knew there had been another layer, one built on quiet support and unspoken hope. A short while later, someone approached them. It was one of the event organizers, looking both nervous and excited. "That was unexpected," the person said with a small smile. "Would you be willing to play again?" The question hung in the air. The girl looked at her grandfather. He did not answer for her. He never did. She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. This time, when she walked to the piano, people watched differently. Not with low expectations, but with respect. She sat down and placed her fingers on the keys. She did not choose a complex piece. She chose something honest, something that felt true to her. As she played, the grandfather listened with his eyes closed. He let the music wash over him, not as memory this time, but as proof that something good had grown from what he once lost. The room listened too. The sound felt fuller now, not because the music had changed, but because the people had. When she finished, the applause was warm and steady. No one rushed her. No one spoke over the moment. Afterward, people came up one by one. Some thanked her. Some thanked her grandfather. A few shared small stories of their own, things they had never said out loud before. The grandfather listened quietly. He did not fix anything. He did not offer advice. He simply listened. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, the hall felt calm again. Chairs were stacked. Lights were dimmed. The girl helped her grandfather stand. He moved slower now, the weight of the night catching up to him. Outside, the air was cool. The sound of distant traffic replaced the piano. They walked side by side for a moment. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I think so," he said. "Feels strange, but good." They reached his bike. It stood quietly under a streetlight, familiar and solid. The girl looked at it, then back at him. "You're more than people think," she said. He smiled, a real smile this time. "So are you." As they prepared to leave, neither of them realized that what happened inside that small hall would not stay there. People would talk. Stories would spread. Not as gossip, but as something meaningful. A simple piano tune had revealed a hidden truth. And that truth was about to change more than just one night. The days after the event passed quietly at first. Life seemed to return to its usual rhythm. The girl went back to her routines. She practiced at home, helped with small chores, and kept mostly to herself. Her grandfather returned to his familiar habits too, working on his bike, taking short rides, and spending evenings in silence. But something had changed. People who had been at the hall began talking. Not loudly, not in a careless way, but thoughtfully. They spoke about the music, the moment, and the biker grandfather who had surprised everyone. The story traveled from one conversation to another, slowly making its way beyond the small circle that had witnessed it. Someone shared it with a friend. That friend told someone else. Each time, the details shifted slightly, but the heart of the story stayed the same. A girl. A simple piano tune. A grandfather no one truly knew. The girl noticed the change first when people started recognizing her. A neighbor smiled longer than usual. Someone at a local store asked if she was the one who played the piano. She nodded shyly, unsure how to respond. At home, she asked her grandfather if he minded. He shook his head. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about what people heard." She understood. Music had a way of carrying messages people didn't know they needed. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was plain, with no decoration. Inside was a short note from a local community group. They had heard about the night at the hall, and wondered if she would be willing to play at a small gathering meant to raise spirits and bring people together. The girl hesitated. She had never imagined playing for more than a handful of people. The thought made her nervous. She looked at her grandfather, expecting guidance. He didn't tell her what to do. "You don't have to," he said. "But if you want to, I'll be there." That was enough. The day of the gathering arrived. It was held in a modest space similar to the first hall. Nothing fancy. Chairs arranged closely. Piano waiting patiently. This time, people were already seated when she arrived. They greeted her with warm smiles, not expectation. That eased her nerves. She played. Again, she chose simple pieces. Tunes that felt honest and calm. She played the song that had started everything, then moved on to others that reflected her own voice. The room responded the same way the first one had. Silence. Tension. A shared feeling that something meaningful was happening. Her grandfather watched from the back. He felt a quiet pride, deeper than anything he had known before. Not pride in attention, but pride in seeing someone grow beyond fear. Afterward, people thanked her. Some shared how the music made them feel less alone. Others said it reminded them of things they had forgotten. On the way home, she asked him if he ever missed playing. He thought for a long moment. "Sometimes," he said, "but watching you feels like hearing it again." The story continued to spread. More invitations came, always small, always sincere. She accepted a few, turning down others when it felt like too much. She learned to listen to herself. Her grandfather became a quiet presence at every event. He stood or sat nearby, never interfering, always steady. People began to see him differently too. They greeted him, asked questions. Some even shared their own pasts, trusting him in a way they never would have before. He listened. He always listened. One evening, after a long day, he sat alone and thought about the road he had taken. The choices, the things he had left behind. For the first time, he did not feel regret. He felt acceptance. The girl joined him. "I didn't know music could do this," she said. He nodded. "It brings people back to themselves." She smiled. They sat together in silence, the kind that felt full instead of empty. Neither of them realized that one final moment still waited ahead. One that would bring the story full circle and leave a lasting mark on both of their lives. The simple tune had started something bigger than either of them could have imagined. And it was not finished yet. The night arrived quietly, unlike the previous events. There was no crowd waiting, no applause to anticipate. The hall was empty, save for the girl, her grandfather, and the old piano that had become a silent witness to so many moments. He sat in the corner, leaning back slightly, observing. The girl approached the piano slowly. She had grown in confidence, yet the calm of the empty hall brought a different kind of nerves. She had never played alone with him watching like this, without other eyes to distract, without expectation. She pressed the first key. The note rang softly, pure and gentle. She played the familiar tune, the one that had started everything. Her fingers moved with ease, yet there was a weight to each note. Each one carried memory, connection, and the unspoken story of her grandfather's past. He closed his eyes as he listened. This was the moment he had kept inside for years. Not for attention, not for applause, but for understanding. The music had returned to him through her hands. When she finished the first piece, the hall felt alive with quiet. It was a different energy than any crowd could give. It was intimate, honest, real. Her grandfather stood slowly and approached the piano. The girl's hands stayed on the keys, waiting. She had never imagined he would play again. Not here. Not now. His fingers hovered above the keys. They trembled slightly, but not with fear. It was anticipation, a careful readiness. He pressed the first note, then the next. The melody was the same, yet it felt deeper now. Years of silence, years of life away from music, had not taken away the feeling. Every note spoke of the past, of regrets, of memories he had carried alone. The girl watched him, amazed. She had always seen him as strong, steady, even rough around the edges. But here, playing, he was vulnerable, human, alive. The room seemed to breathe with him. It was as if time itself had paused. He played slowly at first, testing, remembering, until the music flowed naturally again. When he finished, he did not lift his hands immediately. The last note lingered, soft and full of meaning. He finally looked at her, a faint smile on his face. "There are things you never knew about me," he said quietly. "Things I never shared because I thought they were lost." She nodded, sensing the depth of what he was about to say. "I wanted to be a musician once," he admitted. "Long before the road, the leather, and everything you've heard. I spent hours at a piano just like this. I loved it more than anything. And then life happened. I walked away, thinking I had no choice." The girl listened, her fingers still lightly resting on the keys. She had known he had a past, but not this deep, not this tender. "I kept it a secret," he continued, "because people expect you to be one thing. I became what they saw, what they judged. I let the world define me while the music slept inside." He paused, looking down at his hands. "And then you came along," he said softly. "You brought it back." Tears welled in the girl's eyes. She had always thought she played for herself, for the love of music. Now she understood that she had also played to heal, to connect, and to restore a part of him that had been hidden for too long. The grandfather stepped back, letting her rise from the piano bench. "This is your gift," he said. "Not mine, but it carries mine with it." She looked at him, emotions mingling in a way words could not capture. Gratitude, love, a sense of wonder that their lives had intertwined in this way. He walked over to the window and looked outside. The night was quiet, calm. A few stars shone, distant and steady. "I never thought I'd see this again," he said almost to himself. Music, alive, not just notes but feeling, not just sound, but life. She stood beside him, letting the silence hold them together. The hall no longer felt empty. It felt full of everything they had shared and everything they had yet to understand. After a long pause, he turned to her. "Promise me something," he said. "What?" she asked. "Keep playing, even when it's hard, even when no one is listening. Play for the music, for yourself, and for the pieces of life it can bring back." She nodded, tears running freely now. "I promise," she said. They sat together side by side, for a while longer. The night held them in a quiet embrace. No words were necessary. The story, the secret, the music, they had all found their place. Eventually, the girl rose and took one last look at the piano. She felt a connection that went beyond notes and practice. It was about life, love, and the unspoken threads that tie people together. Her grandfather followed her to the door. The night air was cool, carrying distant sounds of life outside. They stepped out together, not just as grandfather and granddaughter, but as two people who had shared a journey few would understand. From that night on, the music they created together and separately carried a weight and beauty that no one could ignore. The secret had been revealed, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that healed and inspired. And the simple piano tune, once overlooked, would forever be a reminder of love, loss, resilience, and the power of connection that can change lives quietly, but profoundly.